Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, okay, there we go. Let's see. Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn MacDonald, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a painting and installation-based artist, and I'm a current student entering my second year in MCAD's MFA program. I want to take a quick moment to thank Ellen and Mary for organizing this webinar and inviting me to speak to you all today. I also need to take a brief moment to warn you that there is a small chance that my screen and audio may glitch. It kind of does happen. It rarely does happen, but if if it happens here, then it'll last for about 10 seconds. So don't be surprised if I suddenly freeze up. It will pass quickly enough. To start, I'd like to give you a brief overview of who I am and how I set myself up to apply for the MFA program. I was born in Kyoto, Japan, and I was raised in Stillwater, Minnesota. In 2015, I received my bachelor's degree in fine arts from Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia. While at Moore, my work was very much a portrait of my self-doubt, particularly what I felt were my social and cultural inadequacies. After graduation, I worked for 2 years as a mural fabricator in Philadelphia. This meant that I was responsible for painting murals that were designed and led by other artists. The work was active, engaging, and I learned so much about working as part of a collective. But in the summer of 2017, there was an emergency which required me to leave Philadelphia and return to my small hometown. So back in my hometown, I had to take odd jobs to make ends meet. This started me on the path of a new career that had nothing to do with art. By the fall of 2018, I felt that if I didn't make a decisive and dramatic turn back into the arts soon, I would effectively close the door to being an artist. In retrospect, this does sound super dramatic, but I'd like to note that in my hometown, I didn't have a creative community around me. Of course, I wanted to establish local connections and learn about the art scene in the Twin Cities. I longed to be a part of a community of creatives, and I wanted to find my own people. So by the end of October, I reached out to graduate programs throughout the country. MCAD was my first choice for grad school. I first became aware of it from attending a national portfolio there while considering it for my undergrad. When I reached out to MCAD with barely no knowledge about how to apply to grad school, the people I contacted were responsive, helpful, and they were super friendly, more so than the other schools that I applied to. I was uncertain about whether grad school was the right choice for me, and if I would simply prefer moving back to Philadelphia and returning to the mural work. I expressed this to Mary, who set me up for a meeting with Ellen, the Career Center, and Financial Aid. Talking to the heads of these departments convinced me that graduate school would be an investment, that I would be financially investing in a higher level of opportunities that my bachelor's degree couldn't offer me, and that the resources to find and secure those opportunities do exist at MCAD, as long as I was proactive and asked for them. So just before the fall semester began, Ellen reached out to us incoming students and asked us to take the first steps to find our mentor. Part of this involved describing our practice. I didn't follow these directions very well, and instead of actually describing my practice, I created a stream of consciousness that mimicked the types of questions I wanted to ask myself while I was making artwork. This is how it went. How can I be an American-based, half-Japanese artist? Are my inspirations coming from an authentic place or from an exoticized Western perspective? Is it possible or even necessary to distinguish between the perspectives I draw inspiration from, as I myself am a messy mix of two cultures to begin with? How much of this thought is an overcompensation for a lack of interaction with my birth country? Do I even want to broach that topic of overcompensation, or is that where the work can become relevant in a wider sense, to audiences that may not necessarily be my particular mix of cultures, but their own mix? Do my sources and my work really need to be as culturally pure as I wish I were? While this was all a little scattered and most definitely problematic, I did learn one definitive thing through doing this exercise. I learned that I wanted to focus on content rather than technique. I knew I wanted to solidify the ties between the formal qualities of my work and its conceptual framework, and particularly how these concepts can be relevant externally, out of myself. Because I had a background in doing community-based work and large-scale drawings, I was certain that I would be making public art, particularly murals. But the type of work I wanted to make seemed to actually run counter to that. At the time, I felt that art as social practice needed to have big, broad, and universal topics, but instead I felt myself drawing closer inward toward private topics that I didn't have the skills to broach in a public sphere. On my list of potential mentors were a number of muralists and local public artists, but when it came time to choose one, I decided instead on Frenchy Lunning, a liberal arts professor with a scholar's expertise on Japanese art and culture. Just a note, I'm by a window and there's people walking by, so apologies if you hear other noises. Anyway, Frenchy's passion for Japanese culture matched my desire to learn about it, and so our relationship was symbiotic from the start. I was looking for a deeper understanding of my own culture, and Frenchy pointed me towards developing this understanding. Research became a big part of my practice. By early September, something strange started to happen in my process. I could not stop making stuffed animals for some reason. They were really fun for me to make, and I really enjoyed doing them, but I didn't see any critical art or artistic value to them. I was a painter whose work was serious and solemn, and I couldn't imagine how cute stuffed animals could ever fit into that. But I kind of tried to be flexible with myself and just let myself play because that seemed to be my inclination. Frenchy, my mentor, did notice a connection between my little animals and my search for a Japanese identity. They were kawaii, a particular brand of weaponized cuteness which could potentially add additional commentary on Japanese culture and my relationship with it. They also provided me a chance to be lighthearted with my work. I think by diversifying my practice in this way, I made it possible to dig deeper. As an academic and scholar, Frenchy also helped me realize that writing needed to be a central part of my practice. So much of my work was about examining the nuanced ties between form and content, and so much of the cultural references I included were not accessible to most of the audiences I reached. I pulled from Shinto Japanese traditions, Japan's Pacific invasions during World War II, and allusions to sumie ink wash paintings. If I wanted my work to be understood by my audience, I needed to write about it. This piece here became the work I submitted for my first critique in graduate critique seminar. It is white painted on white because at this point I was obsessed with the idea of painting my subjects as ghosts, particularly because ghosts are disembodied spirits divorced from a physical sense of place, which I found was an interesting metaphor to my separation from Japan. This piece was also displayed at the MFA program's open studio night. This allowed a large number of people to engage with it, and I got a good gauge for how people responded to this work. By the end of the first semester, I had built up a small army of little animals. They were completely sewn by hand, and making them was my very first time designing my own pattern. The process for making them was so very different from painting. In my paintings, I feel that every mark needs to be intentional and balanced, yet intuitive and spontaneous. That's a lot of weight to be carried consistently through the process. But with the stuffed animals, all my planning and intentionality happens before I even begin the animal. Once I start sewing, it is purely meditative. I can't stress how valuable it is for me to have this second practice. It balances out the temperament of my painting work. There's a space on MCAD's campus called Gallery 148, which is a gallery run by a committee of students. It exists as a platform for MCAD students to show and curate their own exhibitions. The 8 of us in my MFA class of 2021 all applied for and were accepted to run a group exhibition, which we titled The Body Embodied. We used this as an opportunity to introduce ourselves as a collective to the wider MCAD community beyond the MFA program. This installation here is the piece I entered into The Body Embodied. I felt this was the first time I successfully married my stuffed animals with my paintings, and to be able to do so with the larger MCAD community as an audience was very satisfying. The show ran right at the end of January and the beginning of our second semester, so it was a great way to return back to campus after the winter break. For my next project, I hoped to create an installation that would again marry stuffed animals and paintings in the same space. Unfortunately, however, by the time I finished the different components to this project, MCAD announced that the campus would be closing due to COVID-19. So instead of being another installation, this work was presented as a downloadable PDF. Surprisingly, I found that this actually made the work quite strong. Because I was able to include my writing in the PDF itself, the narrative became indispensably tied to the work. So it's something I would not have done otherwise if it weren't for COVID, but being open to the fact that I needed to change my work really did help me learn some new things. So this is when we were supposed to synthesize everything for our mid-program review, which I believe was particularly strange for this past year because of COVID. Normally our work would be installed in the MFA gallery and we'd include a process book. But for my mid-program review, what we had to do, I simply compiled everything in PDFs and our mid-program reviews happened over Zoom. In addition to my studio work, I was also awarded a very cool opportunity in the second semester. I was selected to be the MFA program's representative at the 8th Annual Twin Cities Art History Symposium. A research paper centered on works I selected from within the Minneapolis Institute of Arts collection, and I prepared a presentation that I would have given at the symposium. Unfortunately, as the event was scheduled to take place on April 4th, it was most definitely canceled. But I did finish the paper and the presentations will be rescheduled, so it will happen. The subjects of my research were two very mystified works by Japanese inkwash painter Nagasawa Rosetsu. There was an almost frustratingly indefinable, elusive quality to these two sparse paintings which suggests so much more than they speak. It's this exact quality that I hope to capture within my work, a yearning for something which is both present yet absent. Additionally, it gave me another opportunity to thoroughly investigate, research, and learn about Japan through its cultural artifacts. One large reason why I chose to come to grad school is that I'm interested in teaching at the college level. It's access to numerous presentation opportunities like this symposium that allows me to diversify my CV, and I'm thankful for that. As a result of COVID and the lack of access to MCAD's facilities temporarily, now I know they're opening up again, but at the time, I found myself physically and emotionally unable to create the deeply questioning work I was making prior. So since March, I have only made stuffed animals. My work has become softer and more colorful. The process of hand sewing has become a consistent, reliably meditative experience during a time of little control or certainty. There were opportunities that I had through the MFA program and otherwise that indeed did fall through because of COVID-19. But the Twin Cities, this location is great for the amount of nonprofit funding for the arts that exist here. I was able to apply for and receive a number of grants that came about as a result of COVID cancellations. So I am grateful for the local nonprofit scene for that. And that is all I have prepared for you today. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Jocelyn.